the leaders during that time wanted to have a greater vision of this region. So I remember while doing some of the researches, Sabah was actually bombed quite heavily during World War II. We could spend even more instead of building highways that cost billions, shopping malls. I think it would benefit, truly benefit the country as a whole.
Hello everyone, I'm Ati Ravinuddin and you are watching From Malaya to Malaysia's 60 Years podcast special. And today I am joined with the North Borneo Historical Society President and Founder, Richard Ker. Hello Richard, nice to meet you.
Kira.
Thank you for taking time to come to join our podcast.
Of course.
And I understand that you are from Sabah, from Tawau, Sabah.
Yes.
And could you explain a little bit about yourself and also the organization that you found?
Well, basically, I'm Sabahan lah, right, from Tawau. I actually started to study engineering, but then I developed interests in many areas, trying to be curious about so many things. So eventually, back in my school days, right, because from Tawau, nobody knew where Tawau was back then, right? So my best friend and I wanted to start something to really introduce Tawau to the world. So while we were doing some of the historical research, I discovered that Sabah actually has a lot of interesting history. But in the online space, you can't really find them. It was really difficult, right? So I said, okay, let me try to start something. So as I was doing all my research related to Sabah, found a lot of interesting photos and those kind of things, history, articles. So because, back then the social media space was also growing, right? So I started the society, Historical Society, to basically consolidate all the information that I collected and put it into that so it becomes a resource for people to do research or find information about Sabah's history. So I call it North Borneo Historical Society.
Okay, that's a good reason for you to create the organization, just to educate people, and I guess it's still going on until today. So it has been for
more than a decade. I think I first started it back in 2011. Yes, more than 10 years already.
Yeah. Okay, that's good to know. And I'm pretty sure when you you were reading through the history of Sabah, I'm pretty sure you came across the formation of Malaysia, where Sabah and Sarawak merged with Tanah Melayu at the time. It's a big deal. It's been 60 years. That's a long time. That's 6 decades.
Yes.
And do you think it was the right move for Sabah Sarawak to merge with Tanah Melayu?
I think because if you think about from the historical context, right, a lot of things can happen and have happened during that time, right? But I think ultimately, during that point in time, I guess the leaders during that time wanted to have a greater vision of this region, right? So I think the formation, it's extremely important back then in order to bring stability, especially back in the 1960s, the world has just gone through a huge world war and those kind of things. So I think it's very important for the people to be able to be as one and progress as a country, right? So I guess there's no such thing as a bad move or good move, but I think it's a move that needs to be done during that time.
For the people.
For the people.
And when you say progress, how do you think the progress has been, given that you clearly have the context of the history part, right? How do you think the progress has been from 60 years ago until now?
Yeah. I think we have to look not to just about 60 years ago. I think we have to look at it from even before and during the war and after the war, basically, right? I think the war actually devastated Sabah quite a lot, heavily, compared to Sarawak, for instance. Because I remember while doing some of the researches, Sabah was actually bombed quite heavily during World War II. In fact, all the big towns, Kota Kinabalu or Jas Sultan, as it was known before, Sandakan, Tawau, and part of the towns in the interior, they were heavily bombed. And I have seen footage of these planes flying, doing these bombing missions. Really, really interesting, right? So of course, I think in order for the region to be developed, right? Of course, there were a lot of initiatives done by then the government. Of course, back then was the British government. Then, of course, if you see the progress, it has been tremendous, right, after the war. And, of course, during the formation of Malaysia, there were a lot of challenges as well, right, to bring everyone together. But, of course, the development has been positive if you compare today and back then. But, of course, there's still a lot of room that needs to be improved, right, because sometimes we see that the development is not equal at certain areas. Some places in Sabah, for example, it is still way left behind. The infrastructure, sometimes, schools, roads, sometimes even the internet. You see that all the time, right? But I think, in general, I think all the relevant parties and authorities are working hard to improve. Yeah.
And you grew up in Sabah, and now you reside in Peninsula.
Yes.
So you've seen the both sides, right? The both sides, the east and the west. Do you think Malaysians are united, and you feel like Sabahan and Sarawakians feel the sense of belonging in the name of Malaysia?
I think it also depends, like, the open-mindedness of people, right? I think those who have spent, getting around in Malaysia and then probably working here in Peninsula, they probably have better contacts.
Okay.
In general, right? But of course, I think there's also some sentiments amongst the Bornean people that, there's lack of unity in general, right? So as I said, it really depends on the people. Like, not everyone has the same opinion of things, but I think the sentiment is there. But in general, I think for Borneans like Sarawakian or Sabahans, I think in general they feel they are much like united compared to in the whole general context of Peninsula and Borneo.
I see. Okay, now we're going to talk about the organization, the North Borneo Historical Society. And I understand you said it has been 12 years since you create the organization. And how has the North Borneo Historical Society contributed to the understanding and documentation of indigenous cultures and traditions in Borneo throughout history?
Yeah. So, but if you look at Sabah's history, right, the documentation were more prominent when the British started to arrive. So that was back in the 1800s, right? So they established the first colony in Labuan, which is now is a federal territory, right? So that was basically the first time they set foot in North Borneo, basically. So once they started to set foot in North Borneo, that was actually the moment when they started to document a lot of things.
Yeah.
Like the different ethnics, different races.
So you have records from then?
Yes, of course. There used to be publication, called North Borneo Chronicles or something like that, where they really documented everything, right? So when the British officers, were assigned to roles in different towns, they were responsible to document everything. So I think those documentation is actually quite important.
Yeah.
Right. Because it really tells like what was the dynamics of the ethnicity and the people who live in Sabah before. And of course we have seen the progress, like how people, managed to change their economic and social standings within the state, for example. Yeah.
And the fact that you mentioned that you have documentation of things that dated back in the 1800s.
Yeah.
What are the key events and milestones in the history of North Borneo that the organization aims to preserve and promote? I'm pretty sure there's a lot.
Yes, there's actually a lot. But one of the things that I personally felt proud of, right, So a couple of years ago, as you know, agriculture is big in Sabah, right? It's actually, in fact, it is the biggest contributor to the state. So even it goes way back to the early 1900s, and rubber is also a big thing in Sabah back then. So a lot of the rubber trees, they were planted in the interior of Sabah, like Kiningau, Tenom, which is about 200 kilometers away from Jesselton. So in those days, when you need to transport goods or jungle produce, the only way was through the railway. So they managed to build a railway within Sabah. So one of the stations was called Malala. This is actually located in Tenok. So when we discovered the history of that station, we actually found out that it was still in existence
Oh,
a couple of years ago, right? But it was actually abandoned. Abandoned as in no one actually wanted to take care of it. Like it was totally abandoned. So we raised a campaign of awareness in that historical society, right? So a lot of people then found out, wow, this is actually quite an interesting place, and it has a lot of economic potential, historical site, right? So when the awareness started to happen, it caught the attention of some of the ministers in Sabah. So we pushed this initiative to them, and fast forward, that old train station has been earmarked as a national heritage.
Oh wow, that's nice.
So that's one of the proudest moments, like, that I was able to at least contribute, right? So hopefully they would do something about it. Yeah.
And that's the kind of things that I feel is very important and significant to our history. The things that you discover and you learn, and when you know it's dated back in like 1800s or God knows when.
Yes.
But it's very interesting to attract the tourists, even the locals, to come and visit.
Of course.
And because things are moving rapidly, and urbanization and development can lead to the destruction or alteration of historical sites and buildings, because we have seen that happen in Malaysia, even in KL.
Well, yeah.
Yeah.
It's so sad, right? So many,
right?
Yeah.
And do you think Malaysia lacks in preserving historical discoveries? Because we have witnessed it.
I think there are like a few sides of the stories, right? At one side, there are people who want to preserve as much as possible. On the other hand, there are people who probably just do not care. They just want to develop certain areas and make money out of it. So I think the balance has to be there. But of course, if we are able to preserve as much as possible, it will be truly beneficial, not just for us today, but it's actually for our future generation. And like countries like Australia, the UK, they preserve
it very well.
Very well, right? Because those historical sites, they become an economic contributor. It creates jobs for the people. It makes people proud of their country. So I think if we could do that even more and more, and preserve all those historical sites, I think it will actually truly benefit the people.
Is it how can we actually preserve it? Is it something that the people have to do, like a campaign, or how can we actually preserve it?
I think, right, people have to leverage on digital, on social media, because if no one is talking about it, no one's gonna do anything about it.
Yeah.
Yes, right. So the more people are able to leverage on social media, trying to, say for example, you, right? Say for example, you encountered or you heard from people that there's this one place maybe in your kampong has historical significant site, and then you're gonna start telling the stories around it, right? And then it gets picked up by people on social media and gets shared, and then that creates attention, that creates buzz, right? So the more people will talk about these kind of things, I think then it will get the attention of authorities, people, that why it must be preserved, because it's gonna benefit the country, as I said, right? It will create jobs, it will create historical sites, and giving a lot of economic activities
Yeah.
on those areas. So what I'm trying to say is we have to talk about it,
Yeah.
yes, as much as possible.
And it takes a lot of effort to preserve these places.
Yes.
And has the North Borneo Historical Society collaborated with local communities or academic institutions to further its mission of historical preservation and education?
Yes, I think at one point in time we actually worked together with Sabah Museum.
Okay.
All right, so I knew the president of the Sabah Museum back then. She was the one who helped a lot actually. So in many ways as well, because some of the things that we posted or I posted on the historical page or on Facebook, a lot of the photos they have not seen before.
Oh wow.
Yeah, so I've managed to discover some of these from all over the internet, right?
Yeah.
I spent a lot of time online checking out, and a lot of the, say for example, the footage that was just taken just after the war. So just when the war ended, actually Sabah was liberated by the Australian. So they came and liberated Sabah from the Japanese. So the Australian army, they came and took color footage of the whole place.
Okay.
And so when I found that footage, I actually shared on that page and on YouTube. It actually attracted a lot of people. So that's why I think people started to aware the importance of that page. And then I am quite proud because there are more and more people who believe that the stories need to be told. And now you can see a lot of Sabah history related pages and groups that have been popping out on social media and trying to advocate the same things.
I'm pretty sure it's nice to see the footage back then, and because you know exactly what it is, and you can compare to where it is now.
Yes.
Is it a lot of difference?
Yes, so a lot of difference. So for example, I've seen the footage of Jas Sultan, right, or KK.
Yeah.
KK in just after the war. So you can really tell, like, okay, this building is no longer around. I mean, a lot of buildings no longer around, right? Because when Jas Sultan was bombed, it was like 80 or 90% of the whole town was damaged. Yes, but there are some other sites that are still there.
Yeah.
For example, the Atkinson Clock Tower, which is not too far from the shore of KK. But of course, you can see that a lot of changes. But so every time when I go to KK, for example, then it feels different because I have seen it in footage before. So I think if more people are able to see this, they're able to appreciate their towns or cities even more.
And the fact that when you see those videos and you would visit those places as well to do your research, you would have met with the indigenous community there that has been living there for their entire life, even for decades, right? And how has the response been in terms of preserving the heritage? Because I know some of the ethnicity, they can get very defensive and they want to protect the things that they have for the past decades. I don't know, maybe 20, 60, more than 60 years perhaps. They want to keep it for rituals, traditions, all these artifacts. So how have they respond whenever you come and do a research?
I do not know specifically for Sabah, but at least when I went to Kuching recently, right, I visited the Borneo Culture Museum. Okay. Which was really, really, really amazing. Have you been there?
No. Okay, fun fact, I've not been to Sarawak.
Okay.
Not yet. But I've been to Sabah.
Yes.
I've been to KK. But I've never been to Sarawak.
So you need to go to this museum.
Borneo?
Culture Museum.
Culture Museum. Okay.
It's probably one of the best museums in Asia.
Okay.
So I think they spend quite a lot of it. So if you go to that museum, right, it's wonderfully curated. It really tells about all the, basically, the culture of Borneo. Of course, a lot of it's actually from Sarawak, right? But from the way I observe, with all the indigenous artifacts and those kind of things, I think the indigenous people, they're actually open to it.
Okay.
For as long as you are able to show that you have the true intention that you want to preserve and, share the stories behind all the artifacts. So when I went there, I was mind blown, right? I have never seen such an amazing museum right here in Malaysia. So I would highly recommend people to go there.
What sort of things can people expect when they go there?
So they basically tell like the prehistory of the whole Borneo Island, for example, and all the different tribes and indigenous people who live or who used to live in different areas of Borneo, right? Of course, you see like they also made a traditional house of the indigenous people, and you can also see some of the skulls. Head hunting
Yes, yeah.
was common back
Yes.
then, right, in Borneo.
That's so cool.
Yeah, and those are actually real skulls,
Okay.
right? You can see. Plus a lot more actually. There's like so many things to talk to view. And I think you can spend 2 days there just to see all the.
It's a big
It's
place.
big. So imagine, typically Malaysia like to build shopping malls.
Yeah.
Right? So this is like
Sadly, yes.
yes, sadly, right? So I'm actually very proud that the Sarawak government spent the money to build that museum.
Yeah.
It looks like a shopping mall inside, like 5 stories high.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's like with all escalators.
Okay.
Really looks like a shopping mall in some, especially the
Yeah.
middle part, right? But of course, it has different exhibit areas, and it's really amazing, really, really amazing.
Clearly, they really put the time and to invest,
Yes.
including the funds
Yes.
to invest to preserve these
Yes,
historical preservations. And when we speak about funds, do you think could you elaborate more on the adequate funding that goes into our preservation efforts?
Well, I know Malaysia has this body, right, that preserves the heritage
Yeah.
sites in Malaysia. But of course, they also rely on donation from people.
Okay.
Or from corporates and those kind of things. I think Malaysia probably needs to spend more, especially from the government side.
Yeah.
I believe, right? Although there might be already funding that goes here and there, but I think if we could spend even more instead of building highways that cost billions, shopping malls, I think it would truly benefit the country as a whole, because I can truly say that museum in Sarawak, in Kuching, is an example that what is possible, right? Instead of you continually building malls and highways and those kind of things. These are kind of things that would actually bring more meaning to the people.
Is it new, the museum?
Yes, it is really, really new. Actually, I think it was launched early this year, I think.
Oh, that's very new.
It's very new. So
because I have not seen it on social media. Because sometimes they share the travel places to go in Sabah, Sarawak, or anywhere in Malaysia. Correct. And I have not seen. I don't even know them which exist.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I'll share with you. I actually posted on my Facebook when I visited, and people actually shared it quite a lot as well.
See, that's the thing. That's what I think is like one of the. It could be a problem in the future because people aren't aware of this historical visits that they could do whenever they visit a state. And I get worried because sometimes people, they can't be bothered to go online and research, right? And how do you think we as a society can continue to appreciate the artifacts other than visiting the museums? Because there are more things to do than visiting museums.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I think
especially the youth,
right? I think in a general sense. So I'm speaking from experience because I've been in the social media space for many years, right? Even the Historical Society is basically started based on the growth of social media back then, because I see the potential of using social media to tell stories. So I think if we could get more and more people, right, to tell stories, especially from wherever they come from, especially their home state or their hometowns, to share it on social media, that would actually help get attention of the people, because sometimes you don't know, or most of the time you don't know what you don't know, right?
Yes.
It is really about being curious, trying to discover more, that Malaysia is not just about food, it's not just about big cities, there are more to it, right? So I guess that's where the opportunities are. and I believe everyone needs to play a role. At least I'm doing my part as much as possible, right? To tell stories about my state and the stories about people also, which I do a lot actually on my social media. I tell stories about Malaysian success stories, businesses that we do not know exist and how they started and now become big companies, right? So it's really about storytelling.
Yeah.
Storytelling, I think, is extremely important. So
what do you think is the reason that the people do not go out of their way to learn about the history? Because yes, we learn history in school, but after school you don't listen to like sejarah anymore. It's not something that you have to learn every single day in school. What do you think are the reason beyond that?
I think there are many things, right? Because when we go to school, right, when we study history, it's more of like, okay, we study history because we want to get good grades.
Yes.
So that we could,
instead of storytelling, like you said.
We have to score.
Yes, we have to score in that A.
Yeah, but if the storytelling part, especially from people, right, if they're able to appreciate the history, not just from the textbook perspective, I think it's going to make it even more interesting. Say, for example, in the Western world, right? In the Western world, they document the history through books, but not just books. And then people started to make films. And then these films sometimes become a hit. They become box office, right? And it basically embeds into the people's mind that the importance of preserving history and preserving the culture of the people. So it has to become sort of like a second nature to the people. So meaning everybody needs to play a role, not just the government, not just the NGOs, but pretty much everyone, like you and I, right? So I think it needs a huge shift in mindset, right? But I do not know how could we take people from A to B to reach that transformation. But at least we have started to see that, as I mentioned, right, a lot of people started groups of to promote Sabah's history, which is already good. I think it's a step in the right
step forward,
in the right direction. But if we get more and more people to do it, and probably getting people who are into films to create films along to talk about this kind of
it's also a way
histories,
to
right?
teach people about history.
That's right. Yeah. Because as I said, storytelling is everything.
Yeah.
In fact, storytelling has been around for the last 30,000 years. It's the best way for people to understand complex ideas and history in a more digestible way. So I think through films, which I believe can be a really powerful way to do it. I'm hoping that one day I am rich enough, or I can be rich enough to create a film, to produce a film. It's actually one of my dreams, actually.
Okay.
To create a film about Sabah's history, especially related to the World War.
Have we had any film that is surrounding Sabah's history or Sarawak?
Maybe Sarawak.
The recent one is like Mike Kilau. That's like an example of like history. Other than that, do we have?
I think there are some short films, but for Sabah specifically, no, not really. But I collaborated with a filmmaker actually. I forgot to mention about this one. So they produce a interesting history about these filmmakers.
Okay.
Like in the 1920s, 1930s, there's this couple from the States, Martin and Osa Johnson. So you can think about them. They were like the National Geographic in those days. They travel around the world. So one of the places that they visited was Sabah, and they made films about the orangutan of Kinabatangan and basically the exotic places, right? Wonderfully captured. So they have a book about it and films. So recently I collaborated with this filmmaker from Peninsula. So lovely couple, lovely ladies. They actually produced a short film about orangutan whisperer.
Oh.
So what it is about when the filmmakers, right, Martin and Osa Johnson, they actually brought an orangutan to New York City, zoo
Yeah.
in New York City, right? But they needed a person to accompany the orangutan.
Okay.
So they hired a local guy, the whisperer. His name was Saudin. So basically to accompany the orangutan all the way,
Okay.
right? So they made a short documentary about it, and it was just broadcasted over History Channel a couple of days ago.
That's
Yeah.
I see. This is what you meant
Yes.
by storytelling in a form of film, and I hope to see that more in the future. Because how can I watch that? Is it on YouTube as well?
I don't think they have posted on YouTube just yet. I think you have to go.
Wait a
History Channel.
little while.
Yes.
Orangutan whisperer.
Yes.
See, these are the kind of things that I don't think people are aware.
Yeah.
They document these sort of things.
Yes.
It's very interesting because you not only it's orangutan, people associate orangutan with Sabah, and
Yes, correct.
this is how you learn. Like you linked everything together
Yes, that's
with the
correct.
history, right?
Yes.
And could you provide more examples of archaeological discoveries or artifacts that North Borneo Historical Society has been involved in uncovering or preserving? And what insights do they provide into Borneo's ancient history?
We actually have not gone into ancient discoveries or
Yeah.
those kind of things, but we did more on the awareness part,
Okay.
right? Because, like, for example, in the East Coast, where I'm from, like in Taiwan, right, not too far from there, there are a couple of caves that people used to live there, and basically what we did was just to highlight that it was actually part of a very important history of the whole Borneo Island, because people used to live there and those kind of things. And also, coming from Tawau, there's also an interesting history that probably not so many people knew about, that there used to be a large coal mine that used to be operated by the British, and it was the world's biggest before. This coal mine, as you know, in the 1920s and 30s, coals were used for so many things, right? For steamships, trains, and those kind of things. So that coal mine actually produced a lot of high quality coals that can be used to power up machineries and those kind of things. And as I said, we do not go so much in providing the historical facts and those kind of things, but we provide the awareness, especially on the social media side, to let people, be aware that these places exist, and these are the places that actually make historical significance and contribution to the
Are these
state.
places open to the public?
Yes, I think a lot of places, yes.
Okay.
I know, for instance, the Gua Madai in not too far from Tawau. Actually, there's a place called town called Kunak,
Yeah.
not too far from Tawau. Yes, I think they're open actually.
I see. Okay, and just before we end today's podcast, I just want to hear from you. What are the important key takeaway for the past 60 years and expectations for the future of Malaysia? What is the most important thing for you?
I think the most important thing is for people to appreciate the history first, right? Because like Steve Jobs once said, you can't move forward if you don't look back, because when you look back, you'll see all the dots will connect.
Yeah.
Only then you can move to the future. So I think the same thing, right? I think for Malaysians in general, we need to be able to appreciate what happened in the past, right? And we learn from, any past mistakes or challenges, and that is actually one way for the country to move forward. Okay, because, of course, there are talks about, that Sabah, Sarawak, or Peninsular Malaysia shouldn't form Malaysia. I believe we have to. We have the conversations, right? But I think we have to look at the greater good, right? How can we really truly progress and unite as a country, that everyone has the opportunity to progress and prosper? I think that's the way move forward. So, so hopefully people would have more of this kind of self-awareness.
Yeah. This kind of conversation as well.
Yes, this kind of conversation. And of course, more storytelling, right?
Yeah.
More storytelling, and get more people to be able to share interesting history. from their hometowns or home cities or home state, and push them up on social media where the attention is today.
Yeah.
I think 90 to 95% of the attention is social media. So use social media correctly.
Correct.
Yeah, correct.
Use it wisely. Yeah, and then that's it, people. Like, you have to appreciate your country and learn about the history and preserve
Yeah.
the artifacts, all the historical sites. They bring significant meaning to our country. It makes us Malaysia, it makes us Sabah, it makes Sarawak, it makes everything.
Yeah,
like
exactly.
form us together as a country. And to those who missed out on this episode, you can rewatch it on our YouTube channel, Sinar Daily, and you can find the rest of the snippets maybe on our social media platforms. And thank you so much, Richard. Today we were joined with Richard Ker, the president and founder of North Borneo Historical Society. And I hope you guys enjoyed today's episode, and perhaps you can pay a visit to Sarawak, to the brand new museum that you mentioned just now, to educate yourself on the history of Malaysia, formation of Sabah, Sarawak, and Tanah Melayu back then. And I hope you guys enjoyed today's episode of From Malaya to Malaysia 60 Years Podcast Special. I'm Atira Munadin. Thank you so much for tuning in. You've just watched From Malaya to Malaysia's 60 Years Podcast Special, a campaign collaboration between Sinar Daily, Bual Studio and Reka Sounds. We hope you enjoyed today's episode, and make sure to follow and subscribe Sinar Daily's social media platform, Sinar Daily MY, for more. I'm Atira Munadin. Thank you for watching.